there's also a real question of fairness in what's happening with some of the fines and fees. In 2010, there was a mandatory minimum court fee assessed by the Cook County Board. That fee is $165. And so essentially, if someone wants to contest a $25 parking ticket or a $50 dog violation, and they go to Circuit Court of Cook County, and they are found responsible for that ticket, they're going to pay a minimum $165 court cost per citation. We've had cases before where someone goes up with several citations and is not found innocent, and the judge is charging them with more than $165. Quite honestly, the flip side of that is sometimes the judge looks at it and looks at the overriding seriousness of the offense and just may decide to dismiss the matter outright because they don't think it's a very fair resolution. It's not that the person wasn't responsible. It's not that they were improperly cited. It's just, is it really fair for someone that was facing a $25 fine to now be responsible for, for a $165 minimum court cost? You also, well, I'll get to that in a second. There's also significant sanctions. There have been some laws passed with very good intentions that have been, for one reason or another, deemed, and this is a constant struggle, I think, between legislative intent and what really happens in courtrooms. But for instance, there's some cases where certain violations could see a minor, a person under the age of 21, see their driver's license suspended for perhaps a violation of open alcohol. And because many times the courts recognize they're just frankly not going to do that. They establish a alternate procedure to hold someone accountable, but not carry out that legislative intent. Now, we can argue whether or not the court should be doing that. The fact of the matter is that's what's happening. So it requires multiple appearances by someone, and essentially oftentimes the ticket is just end up dismissed just to see that process go. So there's some mechanisms that go on in court that quite honestly are a little hard to understand. Whereas a administrative adjudication process is a much more simplified process where the administrative law judge explains step by step what is happening, has many times more latitude to explore the proper resolution rather than just a fine or rather than beholden to the Cook County Board's instructions. The administrative law judge would follow the guidance set up in a village code and instructions that the village council would set up for different offenses. So although when run properly, it's still a very formal, official process, and I would recommend if we move forward to find an administrative law judge, select one that is going to take this very seriously, it's still more easily understood than some of the processes you see at circuit court. I mentioned some benefits to the village, and one of the overall improvements that a process like this allows for is a reduced amount of officers waiting to be called to testify in Circuit Court of Cook County. A reduced amount of officers having to go to a court call. In fact, many times when officers go to a court call, they simply just wait and they may not testify once. And they might be down there for 3 hours at an overtime rate. They might be working the midnight shift, working during their sleeping hours, just waiting because they might be called. There's some real inefficiencies built into the system as it lies now. An administrative adjudication process avoids the need for every officer to appear. The citation stands as evidence of itself, and the administrative law judge handles the citation on the face of the complaint. Now, we would have some staff responsibility in this process, and there would be someone to answer questions of the administrative law judge, but it's not a quasi-criminal hearing where someone challenges witnesses. A second thing that takes a lot of staff time is an administrative review process we currently have in place where people contest parking tickets, or they want to contest parking tickets. They get a parking ticket, and I think this has a lot to do with the fact that they don't get a chance to speak to anybody when they get a parking ticket, and they want that ability to try and explain the circumstances. Right now, we average about 500 of those reviews a year, where someone comes into the lobby, fills out a review, and asks for some consideration. But they really don't get an impartial review of the merits. They really just, we look at it and see if we did things technically right, and if we did, they can pay the ticket or they can go to court. But guess what happened to our court cases going to court from P-tickets after 2010 mandatory $165? They dropped in half. And so I think last year we had 20 people asked to go to court on a parking ticket. And quite frankly, I think there's an underlying reason to that, is because they're facing a much more severe sanction, and I think that smacks of a real level of unfairness that they face that. And there should be a more efficient way for them to have an independent review without that risk that they face. There's also a factor of some local sensitivity. When we first passed our cell phone hands-free ordinance, it was pretty difficult to get judges to take that serious. Now, I will say that it's improved, but there are still times where that ordinance violation goes in front of the judge and it's outright dismissed. Or it might be no fine, but you're responsible for court cost. So you might pay $165 and no fine. Well, in the scheme that the county has with the municipalities, we're supposed to get a share of the fines. We don't get a share of those court costs. So it leads me to my last point about that sharing of the cost and the fines collected. I haven't found in writing, I've been told by several sources, it's supposed to be about 45%. Is what the county is supposed to share back of fines. But that's not all the fees. And so because of the way the process is set up with so many fees and office and judges lowering fines, the village actually, I did an analysis of June's return of monies from the month. We got 21% of all the fines and fees collected by the judge. All the fines imposed by the judge, the village was returned 21% of it. In an administrative adjudication process, all of the ordinance fines that are assessed and paid stay within the village of Winnetka. Any fines assessed by an administrative law judge would stay within the village of Winnetka and not be shared with the county.